What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Hodl My Beer. I'm super excited today. I have Tony from the Bitcoin Way on here. We're going to talk a little bit of self custody, some of the things that they do over there that I'm super intrigued by, and quite frankly, we've had a pretty big week. We've had some nice price action after chopping around for a little while, and we had a few things go on with the new company 21 Capital coming out. So we can dive into all that. First and foremost, Tony, how you doing? Welcome to the
I'm
show.
great,
Thanks for
man. How
coming
are you,
on.
Trey?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I guess I want to start off. I like to highlight a little bit about kind of how you came into the space and maybe what you did before,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll kind of go into what you guys are doing over at the Bitcoin Way. So what did you
Sure,
what
sure,
did you
man. I mean,
do before all this whole rabbit hole that we all go down?
before Bitcoin, I was in tech my entire life. I ran three companies prior to the Bitcoin way, all tech related, cybersecurity, security related, and then made the tragic mistake in 2018 rather, to retire, only to find out that my entire life was rug pulled from underneath me overnight in starting in October 2019 when I was living in Lebanon. In fact, what happens that the banks froze everybody's accounts and the money was gone. That's what happened. So you have a
Wow.
future one day, you wake up the next completely homeless. And so once you survive something as horrific as that, eventually the path leads you, or at least led me, to Bitcoin. And I'm very grateful that it did because, when you go through something like this, you're not necessarily thinking with the best mindset. And so Bitcoin literally saved my life.
Yeah.
Just to sum it up. And then the more I dove into it, the more I started appreciating it, and it sort of like brought hope back into my life and gave me the strength to rise up again. And here we are.
Wow. So are you of Lebanese descent or were you just living there?
Correct.
Okay, you were. What was
Yeah.
what was that like, man? Like firsthand boots on the ground? Were people outside banging on the bank doors? Like, take us and I know it's probably a pretty painful memory, so I
hmm
apologize for asking, but like take us through that because I think it's important for people to realize that this shit happens all over the world, like way too often.
It is the most horrific scene you can ever imagine. I've said it on prior podcasts. Steven Spielberg, with all his genius, can't put a movie that describes it the way it actually is. It is the most frightening thing you can live through because everybody's acting on instinct. And
Yeah.
that makes it a very unpredictable environment because when you wake up and you literally have nothing to your name other than what's, in your pockets, well then, you resort to whatever comes to your mind for, the next move. And when the
Yeah,
next move,
violent
and yeah,
violent human instinct is my
absolutely,
thought.
and what makes things exponentially worse is that if you have dependence, like you start getting the next questions like, what's for lunch? Like, I have no
Yep.
idea what's for lunch. What's for lunch is whatever is left in the kitchen. And once that's gone, then you have to figure out a way to, replenish it. But since nothing works, you have no money, the cards don't work, the ATMs are completely out of business. No one's at the bank. There's no money anymore. It's gone. So what do? Well, most people loot, right?
Yeah.
And so you break into stuff, you hold people at gunpoints, you do anything that comes to your mind in order to get what you want. And if you happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time and you don't know how to defend yourself, well then, you're toast. So it's
So
a really,
so
really horrific show. I mean, take your craziest video game and put it on like the goriest of modes and let it run. It's almost like that.
so what did this happens, and can you go into like a little bit of detail of what exactly happened at that point, like why all this went down? I know the story because I was kind of in the ecosystem at that point, but just for some of the listeners that don't realize what happened.
Well, the banking system, like every banking system in the world, is a Ponzi. The fiat system is a rigged game that is on its last legs these days. And so prior to this collapse, the Lebanese banking system was really touted as, one of the best out there and like the role model for all other banks to copy. But eventually, like with every Ponzi, it ends. And once it does, everything falls apart really fast. The way they survive for so many years is by attracting investors with very high interest rates. So for about 20 to 30 years, you could have, a 20% interest rate on your deposit. So why wouldn't you leave your money with a Lebanese bank account? And banking secrecy back then was, unbreakable. Even you can even argue to this day, no one's been able to infiltrate what really happened because, of course, the cartel behind it is, dead set on never letting anyone know because it, implicates them entirely. So once that ended, no more money came into the country, you couldn't pay out interest rates. So the Ponzi died. And when that happens, how's the bank going to react? Well, it's very easy. They're going to shut down everybody's bank account and clear it because that's how, that's how banks, bail themselves out is by seizing citizens' money. And they imposed capital controls during that time, but only for us regular folks. In the background, there were billions of dollars being siphoned out of the country that actually belonged to the thieves responsible for this heist, right? So the
Yep.
corrupt politicians and the bankers and all that, all these guys were taking their money out of the country because, why not? They could. But for everybody else, you had to figure it out.
So did they um so they obviously freeze all the accounts. Did at any point in time did they turn back on the money printers and give people deposits back, or was everybody
No,
just shit out of luck?
no, they're still waiting for that day to happen. It's been what 5 6 years now, and every once in a while you hear this, you read about this bullish article that promises that Lebanese depositors are gonna get their money back. That'll happen when pigs fly, because
That is
there is no money to give back. In fact, what they did is that if you were holding US dollars in your Lebanese account, they illegally converted it to the local toilet paper, which hyperinflated to nothing. So
holy fuck, man.
you
Pardon my
understand?
French. This is crazy. Like this is
Yeah,
insane
yeah,
to
no,
hear
it is crazy.
firsthand.
It's
Like
absolutely crazy because you don't train for something like this. Like no matter how tough you think you are, and how no matter how smart you think you are, and no matter how rich you think you are, when you realize that you don't control the money, and in fact, the money that you think is not money, it's, a rigged piece of garbage that is
yeah,
printed by, a group of psychopaths, essentially. When you actually realize that, everything changes. I mean, it hit
yeah.
me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, what the hell just happened, man? Like, I mean, I was essentially retired. There's a lot of insanely high net worth individuals in Lebanon. A lot of them are not here, unfortunately, anymore because they couldn't handle what happened. But they woke up without the 10 zeros on their screen. They woke up with just one big zero. Whether you
Yeah,
had a billion or one, the next morning when all hell broke loose, everybody had a zero. There's no like I had more and he had less. It was a flat line across the board. That's what was crazy.
that's insane. So what did you do from there? Like I'm assuming you're still not, you don't have to dox yourself, but assuming you're not in
Oh no,
Lebanon
no, no,
anymore.
no, no, yeah, yeah, no, I'm not in Lebanon anymore, and I'm never going back there for as long as that cancerous garbage is still around. I'll never set foot in that country, which is very unfortunate because it's a place I've always called home. Lebanon is an insanely beautiful country in terms of the people, the lifestyle, the culture. It's almost impossible to beat. But when you're infected, by a bunch of rogue criminals for so long, there's just no point. It's a waste of time and energy. So what happened when everything fell apart is that the whole country was catapulted back essentially to the Stone Age. During the time
Yeah,
of barter. So if you wanted to survive, you essentially had to trade services, based on your skill set, if you had some. So, I had some tech skills. I was trading it for, I don't know, like food, like toast, cucumbers,
Yeah,
tomatoes,
yeah,
like stupid things like that. And it's not like I was trading them at a markup because, I consider that, high value. Everybody was the same. So if you were a tech guy or a barber or whatever it may be, you were trading these, menial skills to eat essentially. So the highest value were like the people that had farms and medical supplies and things of that sort. But if that wasn't bad enough, during situations of complete chaos, what does that breed? It breeds mobs. So
yeah,
you had gangs also come out because their skill is to kill, to steal, to
yeah.
to wreak havoc.
It breeds the worst,
Yeah.
the worst of the worst.
So you're already living a nightmare, and then you have to deal with that shit on top of it.
Well, yeah.
So this
There's
is
no
why I
law and
say it
order.
was like a horror show that nobody has seen before. And if you were at the wrong place at the wrong time and didn't know how to handle yourself or didn't have, what it took to protect yourself, you'd be finished.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you said that because I've had this theory. Have you read Ray Dalio's book, The Changing World Order?
No, no, not
Okay.
yet.
So he writes a book that whatever it is every 250 or 300 years. Essentially there's a new order, right? A new order of things and a new order of power, because society as we know it essentially collapses. And I had this theory of like how much further we would be along as like the human race, as a collective society, if we didn't have to start from zero every 250 years because the money was poison. And that's what causes it. You know what I mean? And I think what you just said in a sense kind of confirmed that, because you're like, we went back to the Stone Ages. Like this is what happens on a mass scale when when whatever money system we have fails, right? Whether it was the coin clipping that led to the fall of Rome, or
Hmm.
the original paper money that kind of toppled the British Empire, and now obviously we're living in this world now. So it's a super interesting point of view. I was going to ask you why you started the Bitcoin way, but that I can understand why you're so passionate about self sovereignty after that story. Is that what led you down this path?
100%. I can tell you with 100% certainty that Bitcoin literally saved my life.
Yeah,
Because when you're living through a nightmare like this, as tough as you think you are, darkness just takes over you and
yeah,
you are not thinking straight. And so for about a year, people considered me dangerous to talk to because all you had to do is say the wrong word or look at me the wrong way, and you could potentially trigger a catastrophe. And so, and I was like trying to keep my composure because, I had people who were dependent on me. But that's how bad and dangerous your mindset is. It took a long time to come out of it, and eventually, what snapped me out was an what's his name, an Andreas Antonopoulos video. I was just leafing around one day. I stayed off the computer, by the way, for almost a year because I just didn't want to see anyone, talk to anyone, do anything. It was really,
yeah.
really
And you
bad. It was
probably
just
don't. I would imagine too. You probably didn't want to see people in other parts of the world.
no,
When you shut off the screen and you're in a fucking war zone,
yeah.
essentially.
I was in warrior mode. I had to ensure I could make it to the next hour, hour by hour by that's how you're living
Yeah,
essentially. So that's all I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about, how are you feeling? I don't care. My objective is to go from point A to point B, and anything that gets in the way is going to,
yeah,
be removed. So eventually one day, I don't even know how it happened. Just happened to flip on the computer. I was just bored, and I came across his video, and it just resonated. It's just like I remember watching it, and I had to listen to it many times because I thought maybe, okay, maybe I'm not in the right state of mind. Maybe I'm hearing things now, right? And
Yeah.
so once it resonated 3 or 4 times, I'm like, what is this thing? Like, could this possibly be real? And so of course I had to verify everything. Coming from a cybersecurity, background, I didn't want to set myself up for yet another disappointment, right? Oh my God, look at this, too good to be true. And then, we fall into this whole thing because I'm not thinking right to begin with, and then get wrecked all over again. So
Yep.
this is what led me down the rabbit hole. And, the more I read and the more I saw and the more I asked, I'm like, holy shit, this is not a joke. This is not a fluke. This is real, and no one's paying attention to it. So
Yep.
once I got the hang of it, I immediately dove deep into Bitcoin just to learn as much of it as possible. And that brought me back to life because it sort of like refilled me up with hope and excitement. And I think, I must have smiled at some point, after
Yep.
after that video. And like people were looking at me, it's like he's smiling, is he okay or something bad going to happen? So that's how it started, and then the more I understood it, my excitement grew about this, and I figured, holy shit, well, this is now there's a way to make money again, right? But then you go out and nobody has any idea what this thing is except for you. And you have to really go looking and asking to find that one other individual somewhere that also knows about this, that you can sort of communicate with. And eventually, you start putting like a little network of people together to transact in Bitcoin to save petty amounts. Like we're talking like $20, $10, $20,
Yep.
$11, whatever it is that you can concoct into Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. So I was introduced to Bitcoin the way it was, like for the purpose that it was created for, to be used as money, right? Because there is no other
Yep.
money. The local currency, it's nothing. It's garbage. It's gone. Like, what are you going to use? And who's going to give you money? All the banks are closed. You couldn't send money. You couldn't receive money. You couldn't do anything. You had to
Yeah.
open a fresh bank account. They concocted these creative names for bank accounts. Like whatever your savings was, that was gone. So if you wanted if you want to use money again in the country, you had to open a separate account that they called a fresh account and put money into it. But who in their right mind is going to
Yeah.
send a
Who?
single penny to a country that just stole everybody's life savings, right? So Bitcoin was literally the only thing that was money that worked. That and maybe
Yeah.
USDT, but I didn't know much about USDT back then. Ironically, I figured out Bitcoin before USDT because that's a big deal now over there as well.
Yeah. So that is no. I completely get with what you're saying. I mean, look, it was obviously probably the darkest time of your life, or one of them certainly. And the fact that you've turned it into what you've turned it into, is a testament to, number one, you as a human being, but two, the power of this network and what it can do for people. And I think that's the reason why, you obviously went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole as opposed to any shit coins or anything like that. And I think that that's my big gripe that I have with the altcoins is there are people that actually need Bitcoin, right? Like that actually don't have a ton of money. Like you said, 10, 11, $20, small contributions to save your future purchasing power. And then you have these other communities that are riding the coattails and preying on people that don't get it. You know what I mean? I talked to a Nigerian Bitcoiner the other day, and a similar thing has happened, over there. It wasn't really the bank shut off, but it's more so the fact that they've never been a part of, the banking system in a lot of places to begin with, right? And now you have all of these, they said in Nigeria there's a ton of scams, there's a ton of, bullshit that comes out. And the reason it does is simple, man. It's just because they feel like they can prey on the weak, and so I think Bitcoin only is huge. And obviously, that was a similar conclusion that you drew before you got, before you started the Bitcoin way. How long did you stay in like Lebanon after all of this stuff happened?
Not long, a few
Not
months.
long.
No, a few months. It
About a
wasn't it wasn't safe to stay there.
Yeah, I
So
figured
at
that.
the
I wasn't sure
at the
what the
first
timeline was.
yeah, yeah, at the first opportunity, you leave. You don't hang
Yeah.
out there if you can. So no, no, it was horrific. And to go back to your point of altcoins, I even dabbled in those initially, not because I believed in them, but because, when you're not thinking right and you're in a situation where you need money fast, that's why you get into altcoins because you think you're going to get that money really quickly. Where in
Yep.
fact, that thing just wrecks you over and over and over again, which makes my situation exponentially more painful because I already was dealing with nothing. And so to
Yep.
lose that nothing to a scam, another scam is like a blowing punch to the gut, right? So, and
That
then once you go through that, there's no force in the universe that'll ever change your mind about sound money. Once you've confirmed it, that it is in fact that's something that no one can corrupt or co-opt or manipulate or print to oblivion. That
yep.
is Bitcoin. Yeah.
No, I
So
No, it's a great point. And that was the point I was trying to make too, is like when people have nothing, to get them involved in these other, shit coins, to prey on that hope and that like, God, please help me make money here.
yeah,
I think it's evil, man. Like I just do. And that's why I don't have respect for the people in that community shilling bullshit because it's not just people in America that are looking at it as gambling, right? Like, and have expendable income. It's people all over the world that come from nothing that don't have a fucking life raft. And now they're getting convoluted with all of these, all of this bullshit out there, which is,
absolutely,
is
man.
why I have, strong opinions for it. So you obviously pull yourself out of that. You start the Bitcoin way. What was the I mean, did you start with like the cybersecurity stuff too, or was it just like what was the thesis from the beginning of starting the Bitcoin way?
Initially I was freelancing before the Bitcoin way. I was literally talking to anyone that would listen to me. Like I'd go out into the streets, walk in and anywhere, supermarkets, gas stations. It doesn't matter. Just wanted to talk to people to, tell them about this thing because I was so filled with excitement and hope. And plus, I was hoping I could use that just to make a little bit more income, right? To live. And so of course a lot of people ignored me, but there were enough people who listened, and those people eventually became clients, and I helped them set up, and they understood that and what have you. And you fast forward like to this day, when I talk back to these people, it's like some of the most emotional conversations because they thank me for saving their lives. Back then, imagine we were both in the same situation, but because I told them about Bitcoin, they had no idea. And, and they sort of like took my word for it. It was like, they just went blind faith because I don't know. They just believed me. I was convincing enough, whatever the reason may be, they did it. And you fast forward to now, 2025, and it's an absolute, life-changing difference between where we were and where we are now. Like nobody's writing like billionaire status. It's not what I'm saying. But when you are homeless and now you don't have to worry about where the next sandwich is going to come from, that's a massive upgrade, right?
Yep.
So that's what I'm referring to. And when you talk to people in countries like Argentina, Nigeria, Turkey, it doesn't take long for people to understand where you're coming from. And that's why we're very extreme a bit at the Bitcoin way now. Some people say, oh, they're too maxi, they're too toxic. But there's a reason for this. It's not a marketing ploy. It's not, a strategy to convince people to buy a service. It is coming from a place of genuine pain that I don't wish others to experience. And the problem with people that are financially privileged is that they assume, like I did at one point, this will never happen here.
Yep.
That is a death sentence to anyone who still believes it, because the mechanics of fiat currency don't care where you live, don't care about the size of your house, don't care what car you drive. When the money fails, and they're all failing, it doesn't matter how many zeros you have on that screen. You will also end up with
Yep.
just one. That's the problem. And trying to bring
Yeah.
awareness to this is very challenging because, as long as people are comfortable, there's not much incentive to listen to a story like this, right? Because you assume, that's just over
Yeah,
there.
that's
We're
it's
okay here.
halfway across. Yeah, it's halfway across
Yeah,
the world. That'll never happen here. You have 2 points that I want to touch on real quick. Sorry, man. What you'll realize is I have a very bad memory, so I like to touch on this
go
stuff
ahead, man. Go ahead. Be my
as it
guest.
comes up. So the it'll never happen here thing, I think you are right. But what I will say is that there are a lot of people waking up to it because of the significant overreach. Like the things we used to talk about 4 or 5 years ago with the debanking and there was the whole trucker thing in Canada
Hmm.
that happened. Now you have the European Union saying that they're going to have discretionary savings, and spend it towards whatever they want. Like this isn't a developing nation thing anymore, because the central bank puppets behind everything have overreached so much and played their cards so badly that they are the best marketers for Bitcoin. You know what
100%.
I mean? And
100%.
so I think in the U.S. we're still not there yet. And a lot of people still maintain that it can never happen here, and I hope it never does happen here. But that's not why you prepare for the worst. You can expect the best, and I'm a very optimistic person, but you have to prepare the other way, especially with all of this stuff that we've seen. And then the other point that you made on the toxic Bitcoin maximalist position, I think is just spot on. I think there's a when people talk about being a toxic, Bitcoin maximalist and not, just kind of like giving people shit who invest in other stuff. Like that's not that doesn't mean you're an asshole to everybody. It just means you're trying to show people not, how to get burned like all of us have been burned who've come into the ecosystem, right? And when I think of that toxic aspect of it, like for me, the only people I'm going at and calling an asshole are the people that know better and still shill all of the bullshit. Like that's what I think that toxic aspect is reserved for. And I'm a big proponent of people that who are new in the space or don't, curious. Like there's no reason to be toxic to those type of people, right? You want to be nice and show them what you know and all of those sort of things. But I don't think that's a bad thing anymore. I think there's some people who are a little over the top and maybe aren't treating people with just basic respect because they don't understand it. But look, I think I'm of the opinion save all of the nastiness for the people who are just bullshitting and spewing things even though they know essentially they know better. So
Yeah.
those are the two things I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit. So you guys start the Bitcoin way, and you said it was just your people that you were talking to, and eventually they wanted your help for it. So like, what is like? Say I'm somebody who's new to this space and I don't understand what you guys do over there. Like, take me through that. Why should I go to the website and see what's being offered? What is the I guess the most basic thing that you guys offer cater to?
Absolutely, man. I mean, we've put the Bitcoin way together based on, many months of studying Bitcoin and, going through the mistakes and, making sure we've covered all bases in order to do this as intended. Our mission here really is to educate and empower anyone who wishes to opt out, to protect their wealth, to learn how to do it right, to get it right the first time, so that you don't have to watch the videos, you don't have to go through the trial and error, you don't have to, potentially make the mistakes and lose your funds. We've already gone through this process. We know it by heart, and we're extremely strict about all of the criteria that surrounds it. So, for example, whether it's the hardware, whether it's the software, whether it's the methodology, we are very comprehensive and detailed about this. But we break it down into, baby steps. You don't have to come from a tech background. You don't have to have a PhD in cryptography. All you need is like a willingness to learn and being comfortable at a very basic level on a computer. So we hop on a call just like this one and we handhold every individual through every step of the way. So we make you, essentially, our objective is to turn you almost like someone like us, very comfortable in the space, irrespective of the amount of money that you're using. So whether you're transacting with $100 or 100 million, the procedure is the same. Self-custody is not nuclear physics. It's just a brand new series of steps that the world has never seen. So step number one really is understanding money before you get into any steps, because you don't want to come into Bitcoin thinking it's like a get rich scheme, or like you're buying like an Apple stock because you want to go buy your Lamborghini in 2 weeks. That's not what it's for. If
Yep.
you're coming in with that mindset, you're going to get wrecked 100%, because that's not what it is. So understand money, understand Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a savings technology whose purchasing power will appreciate forever, mathematically. It's, because it's a scarce asset, no one can change that. So once that clicks in, the next thing to understand is that the revolution of Bitcoin isn't just owning it. Like, you can't just own it and like, that's it, my job is over. No, you need to literally own it by holding the private keys. If you're leaving it on an exchange or you're trusting a third party with it, you don't own anything. And that is a
Yep.
big mistake that a lot of people are doing, because if you do that, then you're vulnerable to the same collapse that I lived through, because it's in somebody else's control. You need to hold the private keys, and this is where we come in into teaching and training everyone how to do this and getting it right the first time and becoming like at ease with it. So it's almost like something you've been doing your entire life. So that's priority number one, making sure the money is safe. Then we can move on to priority two, which is more where the cybersecurity side of things comes in, which is protecting your devices, reclaiming your personal privacy, your online and all that, whether it's your computer or your phone, with de-googled privacy phones, anonymous SIM cards, and what have you. That entire world, we introduce you to it, we walk you through it, we handhold you through the process, and we get you, very comfortable in it. So that's stage two. And stage three is really about the individual. If you're not happy where you're living, you don't like your government, you think they're completely nuts, or they're giving you a headache every other week, leave. We help people find Bitcoin friendly, freedom friendly jurisdictions that, they can have a residency program there, which eventually turns into citizenship, where people respect you as a human being, and where you can surround yourself with like-minded individuals who share the same values you do. And so it's almost like, it almost feels like a spiritual, being reborn again into this new world where you leave everything that you thought was good for you behind, and you actually meet things that are. This is what happened to me. Like, with the thousands of folks I used to know before everything fell apart for me, I haven't seen or heard a word from any one of them. Can you imagine? Um,
Yeah, that's insane.
yeah, so not only was the financial collapse, a betrayal in and of itself, but then you realize that, your entire social circle, and I had a really big one, was also bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And so it changes you as a human being, really, once you walk through through this type of journey. And so the new folks that you meet, Bitcoiners, It's almost like a magical reunion. It's very hard to explain. Like you meet someone for the first time, but somehow the conversation just flows, endlessly, as if you've known them your entire life. And so this is where, we try to focus our lives on in jurisdictions like this by meeting people that we work with, bringing them over, making them our neighbors, that type of thing. And it's growing. It's growing. There's been huge, huge demand for, that sovereign lifestyle, which is exactly what we're about. Protect the money, protect the devices, protect the individual.
I love that, man. You're just taking people through your journey. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely.
And I love step three there as well. Like I think I had no idea, you know what I mean, that was part of what you guys do. So I think that is so so cool because it's like you said, you're taking first it's the money, then it's the devices, and then it's the actual, the individual themselves. No, so that I appreciate the rundown there. So I have a question for you, and I don't know, I haven't seen you on, talk about this topic before, but when you're talking about self custody versus multi sig or something like that, what are your opinions on it?
Which multi-sig are you referring to? Are you referring to the multi-sig where you're in charge, or you're referring to like institutional collaborative multi-sig? Because there's a big difference between the two.
Yeah, I would say I think when most people nowadays at least hear multi-sig, they're
Okay.
talking about the collaborative version of it.
That's a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up because we are not advocates of that at all. There's a
Yeah.
lot, in my opinion at least, there's a lot of misleading marketing around that topic because they're services that are promoted to be, for your safety, to eliminate single points of failures, blah, blah, and all that good stuff, right? Which to
Yeah.
someone who knows very little or nothing may sound very appealing. But here's the problem with collaborative custody that involves third parties. First of all, most of them, not all of them, but most of them will KYC you. For those that don't know what that means, it's know your customer. That means
Yep.
that before you can work with these institutions, you have to, give up all forms of identification, your ID, passport, whatever it is that they ask of you, you have to give it. So that's red flag number one. People don't normally see it as a red flag because we've just been accustomed to always having to answer these questions, whether it's to open a bank account and what have you. This procedure was never made for anybody's protection. That's a big lie that I also discovered.
Yeah,
KYC, all
they
this,
claim,
yeah,
just real quick for the listeners, they claim that they need to do this for terrorist organizations or this or that, like
exactly.
illicit activity and crime. Meanwhile, the US dollar is used in all of that shit overseas.
Absolutely.
And it has
So
nothing to do with
KYC
people
is for
here.
nobody's protection.
Yep.
KYC is a control and surveillance mechanisms. That's it, nothing more. So that's red flag number one, because now all that information belongs to whatever institution you decided to sign up with, and you're hoping that they protect it properly. You have no control over that. So if one day they get hacked, leaked, whatever it may be, well, now you have a potential problem because whoever targeted that Bitcoin institution is not an idiot. They know what they're
Yep.
going after. And now you potentially have a problem on your hand because these folks know who you are, where you live, how much Bitcoin you have, and what have you. So that's one. The other fact that, they don't tell you is that you have zero privacy. Whenever you sign up with a third party, they have full eyes on your wallet 24/7. Maybe you don't care because you don't think the value of Bitcoin is that high yet. But when Bitcoin becomes worth millions or tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, you're going to care. So that's two. The third thing is that the claim is that you hold two keys and they have a backup key. So if in case you lose one of your keys, you can call them up, they can sign, no problem. You have access to your funds. But what happens if a government threatens them and prevents them from signing and you go ahead and lose one of your keys?
Yep.
Then you're screwed, right? Because you can't do anything. Then you're locked out of your funds. Now the argument is, oh, it's never going to happen. My friend, when things go bad and things break, this is exactly what happens. at the top of the list. So we don't recommend any of these things. And for anyone who's read the white paper, the Bitcoin white paper, not a single letter in that white paper mentions institutional involvement in the custody of money. The Bitcoin revolution is 100%. 100 means solo, you and you alone, personal responsibility and custody of your money. That's it. If
Yep.
you lose the money, yes, it's terrible, it sucks, but that's how it's supposed to be. If you introduce a third party and something blows up in your face, because at some point it will, then it's your fault, nobody else's. So we don't advocate for that. Now, to answer your question about multisig in and of itself, that's an extremely secure setup where there's 3 or more keys involved. If we want to do multisig, either the user is in full control of all the keys. We don't get involved in that process at all. We don't touch anybody's Bitcoin. We don't sign any transactions. We help you build that multi-sig yourself as intended. Now, if you want to build your own collaborative multi-sig because you want to involve, I don't know, like 2 people that you trust, then we'll help you build that model with your people. Again,
Got it.
we don't get involved in that process at all. That way, you maintain full privacy. It's within people that you trust. And if one day, you want to change one of these individuals, it's not the end of the world. We train you on all of that stuff. So that's our approach with regards to multi-sig. Technically, it is much more secure than single sig, but there are advanced single sig implementations that, we assist with that are extremely secure for those that don't want to necessarily go the distance with multi-sig because it is technically more demanding and, requires a bit more responsibility. So it's definitely not for everyone. In fact, for most people, at least, especially when they're starting off, multisig is not something you should be looking at or thinking about whatsoever.
Yeah. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I've heard, differing opinions on it. But I do tend to agree with your thought process through it. Less, I've just always been a fan of, self custodying and staying away from multi-sig as a whole, like you said, because it's more complex and I'm not a tech guy and I don't claim to be. And so I tend to lean towards that option. I have a few opinions. I want to talk a few current events that kind of came up this week. Uh, so we have obviously strategies buying a ton of Bitcoin. Now you have 21 Capital. I'm a huge fan of Jack Mahler's just in general. I love what he's done at Strike. I use them for like where I buy it. Buy Bitcoin before it goes to cold storage. What are your thoughts? And I'll share my opinion, but I want to hear what you have to say first. What are your thoughts on all of these companies coming out of the woodworks and more so I guess companies like Strategy or 21 Capital that are just financially arbitraging the system. Where do we go from here? Like, do you see it working out, or what are your thoughts on it?
It's inevitable. Bitcoin is for anyone. Whether you like them or not, it doesn't really matter. Bitcoin is for, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So government involvement, institutional involvement, as far as I'm concerned, was something that you can't avoid. Now, whatever they're doing, they're building a business around, their services, and they're selling you a share of their company. So some people, for whatever reason, may not be able to buy the asset Bitcoin directly, and so their next best thing is to buy something like MicroStrategy or, 21, whatever that may be. But
Yep.
what's to remember is that whether you're buying strategy or something similar, you're not buying Bitcoin. You're buying a
Yep.
share just like any other share, like an Apple or a Tesla or whatever. And whatever profits you think you make, these are all in dollar or fiat denominations. So you're still subjected to the same regulations. You have to pay capital gains tax or whatever other taxes involved. Nothing's really changed, right? So it's just like in Bitcoin, but it's not really Bitcoin. So for those that have the option to buy the asset directly, that is absolutely categorically 100% what you should be doing and not wasting a single penny on something that is not Bitcoin. Because the days of buying on-chain Bitcoin, which is, what some people are still doing now. On-chain meaning like you go into like a Coinbase or Strike and you buy Bitcoin and you withdraw it. The base layer. That's going to disappear this year, 2025, in my opinion, unless you're sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars. Because now, unfortunately, you've got the big players that understand Bitcoin almost the same way we do, and are FOMOing into it. And there's not much supply left globally of Bitcoin. There are about, I don't know, like 1.2, 1.3 million Bitcoin. So if you take BlackRock, just as a quick example, if they were to siphon all the remaining amount, globally of Bitcoin, for them, that's like they're buying a Mars bar. It doesn't cost them anything. But when they do that and that supply is gone, the general population will wake up to some stupid number on the screen for Bitcoin because there's nothing left, right? And then the race upwards for those that pay attention to that number go up. That's when it starts happening. So I wouldn't
No,
worry too much about what other people are doing, with their strategic reserves. What we always recommend is if your strategic reserve is at zero, that's what you need to be FOMOing into. That's what you need to be panicking about. Because if you don't have an allocation to Bitcoin, in my opinion, you're insane. Because there's nothing in this universe, nothing, absolutely nothing, that holds value in a way that no one can take away from you and corrupt other than Bitcoin. And all it takes is requiring 3 or 4 like basic steps, easy steps, instructed to you by a good teacher.
yep,
Once you have these steps, you're king, like you become what I like to call unconfiscatable. Your
I love
money,
that.
your rules.
Yeah, and so that was. I'm glad you pointed all that out. That was kind of the same sentiment that I shared with all of the stuff coming on. Like I don't buy it, but I understand why people would. You know what I mean? If you have
Yeah,
something that if you have a 401k or something like that that you need that you can convert, I think those tools are awesome. And again, like you said, it's freedom money. So guess what? People are going to use it differently than you, and if you don't like it, that's the whole fucking point. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Anybody can use it in whatever way. I like it too because I think that it's going to bring new people into the ecosystem. Like that's what we want. You know what I mean? It's going to bring people from traditional finance into it. And I don't mean the big companies, obviously they're coming too. I mean the individuals that are interested in stocks and maybe haven't gotten into crypto yet because they've heard, of all the FTX stuff or Mt. Gox or um, they got burned with shit coins. There's a million reasons. Now they're going to be able to actually come into this ecosystem, see what's going on with 21 Capital or what's going on with strategy, and say, why are they buying so much of this stuff? Like, what do they know here that I don't know? Right. And that's the thing that I like about not only 21 Capital. We'll see if GameStop starts doing it, but like now you're starting to have multiple bigger companies buying this, and it's going to make people scratch their heads whether they're in traditional finance or not. Like, why are these guys buying it? And I think that that's a net positive for the ecosystem, right? For what we all want, which is to get off of the fiat standard. And you made a really good point about supply dropping on exchanges. I just had Grok run something for me over here this week alone. 2.68 billion in inflows. So that that's quite a bit of quite a bit of Bitcoin. And it's not going to it's not going to last forever. And then the other thing, I guess that happened this week, was there another thing? I might be getting ahead of myself here, Tony. I think we might have covered it all. I
you're
don't know,
referring
man. I
to
got
what outflows of Bitcoin?
No, 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 no. There was inflows this week for the ETF. That like 2.68 billion. I
Oh
don't know.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know,
That's
man.
that's not
I
surprising, man. That's not surprising. I mean, there's a lot of people for some inexplicable reason, are choosing, the wrong approach to Bitcoin simply because either of lack of education, but I think it's more like lack of self-confidence. Here's one thing you won't hear a lot that I can tell you, with 100% confidence, is that we live, when I say we, like folks like you and me, we live in an echo chamber. Okay. And
Yep.
the general population has no idea what's going on, sadly. Like it's
Well, they
like
live in a different they live in a
yeah,
different echo chamber. You
like
know what
we're
I
we're
mean?
we're on Earth and they're on Pluto. That's, how disconnected they are from what's going on. And what was really like an eye-opening moment for me, and a rather big disappointment, was when everything fell apart in Lebanon, and like I eventually, found my way to Bitcoin. I thought I was late. I thought, holy shit, the whole country's in Bitcoin and everybody knows this, and I better like scram.
Yeah.
To this day, imagine 6 years later, very few people are in Bitcoin. And you'd think, after being completely massacred financially like this, that almost everybody would be in it. Sadly, that's not the case. Why?
Yeah.
Go figure that one out, right? So, some people have more immediate needs. They have to eat, so they can't do Bitcoin, because the volatility is too much. Fine, I get it. So, they're stuck in a rut, right? But everyone at one point was stuck in that same rut. It's not like somebody had an advantage. But when there's a will, there's a way. But the way I did it was extremely hard because you had to essentially learn a foreign language. Like I had no idea like what Bitcoin was. For me, Bitcoin was like literally learning like alien technology. But
Yep.
that
And you're
video.
and you're and you're a tech guy too, and it was still
Yes,
like
and
that.
I'm a
You know
tech
what I
guy.
mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm a
no.
tech guy, and it was like alien technology. So I can only imagine what somebody who isn't a tech guy, what they must be thinking. So there's that. And then throughout like different places where I've been, when you talk to people, they tell you it's not for me. Bitcoin, it's like for government or big companies.
Yep.
It's for these people. It's not for me. So they automatically like boycott themselves out of something that was literally created for them.
Yep.
So that for me was like a crazy eye-opening moment. I'm like, what are you thinking? This was created for you because of everything you've been complaining about money-wise. For some
Yep.
reason, the general population, the psyop is so strong that any deviation from that hamster wheel petrifies them. Like they think they're going to jail or something bad is going to happen, which is crazy, right? So,
Yeah. On
how
that
long
point,
do these people take to snap out of that psyop is anybody's guess.
yeah, I was gonna say on that point, I think it's just that I do think that it is a little bit of a psyop, but I also think it's more so of people always just feel like they missed it, right? Like they can't conceive how high this thing could possibly go because it's already at 100,000, right? It's a unit bias type thing. They're like, really, like $1 million a coin, $10 million a coin, when the answer is if fiat has no bottom, then Bitcoin has no top. That's the
Correct.
answer.
Correct.
And so I think what we need to do as a broad community is continue to change the discourse of not get rich quick, which it was over the last 10 years, right? And it will continue to do that for over a long enough time horizon, but it's not get rich quick. It's just don't lose everything slowly. You know what I mean? Or don't lose everything. In your case, what you talked about, don't lose everything overnight. Which is what happened in Lebanon. There's one thing we are coming up on an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for coming on here. I know it was a long time coming. We had this scheduled, so I'm super glad we got to do it. The last thing I wanted to ask you is, do you think that for older generations, now and even in the future, that self custody is going to be too complex for them, or do you see a paradigm shift there where whether you're 75 years old or 90 years old, that or you're 25 years old, right? That anybody should and could self custody.
That is an excellent question, man, and I'm glad you brought that up as well. Um, I'm happy to let you know that most of the folks that we work with on a daily basis at the Bitcoin Way are 50s, 60s, 70s, and well into their 80s that
I
have
love
no
that.
tech background. Okay. And all of these guys are doing self custody the way I would do it. So, at that level of detail, at that level of attention, at that level of OCD. Going forward, I think self custody is going to become a lot simpler. It's technology, so it's going to continuously get fine-tuned and simplified and what have you as time progresses. But until we get to the stage where it's just like a one-two click on an app or on a computer, you have to protect it, right? And so that process has is already way simpler than when it was when Bitcoin was first created 16 years ago. Back then, you really had to, be like a super
Yeah.
geek in order to understand this. Now, not so much. And give it another few years, it'll become even more simple and what have you. I personally think that in about 50 to 100 years, when Bitcoin is normalized in the world, because we believe that it already is the world reserve currency. There's no doubt in my mind that that's where we're headed. In about 100 years, when it is, and it becomes as common as high-speed internet, no
Yep.
one's going to be talking about it the way we do. Unless somebody goes back in time to study history, then they're going to study about us and how we went through this fascinating time. But I think in that, if you fast forward to 100 years, anyone not doing self custody will be considered like fucking crazy because
Yeah. I
like
I
it'll
hope
be
you're
like the
right.
complete
Yeah.
opposite. Like, why would you trust someone else with your money? Like
Yeah.
I
Like,
joke around this, I joke about
yeah.
this
Can
in almost every
can you believe
interview.
that's yeah? They're gonna look back and say, "Can you believe we used to let
Yeah,
these institutions hold everything that we
yeah.
work for?"
Yeah, that's
No.
something we joke about all the time. I'm 100% sure of it. Like if I were to come back in 200 years and just watch scholars, for sure they'd laugh at us. Like, look at these idiots. They're
Yeah.
using this that was not money. They thought was money. They slaved for it, put it in a bank that took away their money, and they had to ask for permission to use it. Like that's the perfect description of someone who's insane.
It's fucking insanity when you put it that way. It's
Yeah, it is, right? But
it
that's
is.
exactly
Yeah.
that's exactly the brainwashing that you're born into. So it doesn't
Yep.
seem like insanity, but once you snap out of that system and you start living in a different world, the Bitcoin standard, and you're like looking in and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what was I doing?" So that's why it's so painful to watch someone who still argues about the validity of Bitcoin and who still thinks that it's a scam or the government's going to stop it or like whatever bullshit that
Or
is
that it
out
doesn't
there
have any value
or
or
it doesn't
anything
have
like
any
that.
value. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right, my friend, if Bitcoin doesn't have any value, what has value? Is it your dollar? Like, what
Yeah.
is that backed by? Is it gold? Sure,
Yep.
okay, it has some value, but try to take it somewhere or pay someone with it. Like, how are you going to do it? Is it your
Try to
house?
take it out of Lebanon or not get robbed when
Exactly. Like, is
yeah.
it your house? I say, well, real estate. Really? How are you going to pay someone, with real estate? Like, what you're going to send him your door? Like when you
Yeah.
want to pay for something, like, how are you going to do it? There's like a ton of regulatory hurdles. And if somebody decides that, now the house doesn't belong to you, which it doesn't, by the way, but they can just scribble down a new piece of paper, boom, new legislation, new laws. Now the house is not yours. So,
Yeah.
unless you have an army bigger than the ones that they're going to send to your door in case you resist, it's not yours.
It's not.
Bitcoin is the
No.
only thing in this universe that you can actually own 100%. It's the only thing. There's
That
nothing else out there that you can 100% own. Memorize 12 words in your head, done. Where are you going to
yep.
do that?
I agree, man. I agree. This has been
right?
so much fun, dude. Thank you so much
Yeah, of
for
course, man. It's always a pleasure trying to, push out this message as much as possible. I know that sometimes it may come across as a little toxic, but I can assure you that it's definitely coming from a genuine place of pain that, we don't wish upon anyone.
I
So
love it. This is a
we try to
toxic
tone
this
it
is a
down. We
toxic
try to tone it down sometimes, but depending on what topics come up, sometimes it just triggers back a lot of a lot of emotions and a lot of visions of things that were experienced in the past that are not pleasant.
Yep. This is a toxic Bitcoin maximalist podcast, so you came on the right one, my friend, to
Okay,
get
all right,
to
good.
get all that stuff out.
Okay, good.
No, this has been awesome. Tony, I'm gonna have your Twitter profile in the show notes so people know where to find you. Everybody listening to this, check out the Bitcoin Way. If you're not self-custodying, look, it's a private concierge service from what Tony was saying. So there's no
Yeah,
reason not to do it.
first 30 minutes
This
are free, by the way, for anyone. No
I love it.
obligation, just chime in to say hi. No obligations at all.
That's amazing, man. Congrats on all your success for pulling yourself out of that place that you were in 2019, and keep fighting the good fight, man. I think what everybody's doing in this ecosystem to contribute in one way is it's all paddles rowing in the same direction. And
Absolutely,
so
man. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Trey. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, man.
so did I, man. And thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the show. Cheers.